Well, welcome everyone to a conversation between our authors, Elizabeth-Irene Baitie and Mamle Wolo, about their novels, Crossing the Stream and The Kaya Girl. I'm Brenda Randolph, one of the outreach coordinators at the Center for African Studies at Howard University. And I'm first going to introduce our moderator for the Q&A, Dr. Helen Bond, who is also at Howard University. Dr. Bond is Associate Professor of Curriculum and Instruction in the School of Education at Howard, and she is the former Director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching, Learning, and Assessment. She is also a Fulbright Nehru Scholar to India, co-chair to the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, founding member of the Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership at Howard, and most importantly for us, she is the liaison to the Center for African Studies at Howard. We work with her every year and her students in the School of Education, introducing them to great books on Africa like we have today. So now let me introduce our authors. Elizabeth-Irene Baitie. It lives in Accra, and actually both of our authors are in Accra. Mamle, you too, right?
Yes, so I'm in Accra.
Yes, both in Accra.
Greetings.
And Elizabeth-Irene directs a medical laboratory by day and writes for children and young adults at night. Working in a lab is about running tests and making discoveries, she says. That's what the characters in my books find out. In life, you don't discover what you're made of until you're tested. Her seventh book, middle grade novel, Crossing the Stream, is a 2022 CABA honor book, and she and her husband have 3 adult children. I just want to say that Elizabeth-Irene and I were together just last weekend when we had our CABA celebration recognizing the wonderful 2020 winners of the Children's Africana Book Award. Mamle Wolo is an award-winning Ghanaian German author who studied at the University of Cambridge and the University of Lancaster in the UK, and is an honorary fellow in writing of the University of Iowa. She writes fiction, poetry, and screenplays, and as we said, she lives in Accra. And she is shortlisted for a CABA Award for 2023. So, and so now I would let the authors take over, Elizabeth-Irene and Mamle. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda.
Thank you, Brenda. Hello, Mamle.
Hello, Elizabeth. Good to see you.
Excellent to see you as always. And good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody in the US. Okay, so Elizabeth, today we're going to talk about our books within the context of the city of Accra, our stomping ground. Yeah, I've always thought that Accra is a great place to set stories, and I know that there are many stories set in Accra. It's such a melting pot where different, cultures and languages and so on come together, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's I always. If there's one word I'd use to describe Accra, it's vibrant. It's very much a melting pot of cultures and traditions and people and just the flavor, not just of the food. I mean, everybody hears about jollof, and of course, Accra is a big jollof place as well. But it's just the flavor of the different people, the different settings. It lends itself to very rich storytelling.
Exactly. And one thing, the common theme I think that connects the stories that we are discussing tonight is crossing the social divide in a huge city like Accra. Accra is a city in which you can find extremely wealthy people driving the latest cars. You can also find people who don't have access to basic education, who haven't learned to read and write. And I think in our stories, we both feature these kinds of contrasts. I wonder what it was like for you, because when I was writing The Kaya Girl, I was, of course, coming from a particular side of the divide, because most people are born and raised on one side of the divide or other. And so what intrigues me is how, and I'd like to know, from you as a fellow writer, how did you write about the side of the social divide that wasn't yours in your novel?
Right, that's a good one, Mamle. Thank you. I mean, the title of my book is Crossing the Stream, and crossing the stream is actually literally physically a stream. And I'll come to, I think I can probably best illustrate it in a reading here. But I grew up in my grandmother's house, and it was interesting because my grandmother lived on the edge of what we called a zongo. Now, a zongo was a community where people who had come in from the north of Ghana would come and settle. They would live there. It was a sprawling and very tightly knit community, very small buildings, very crammed together, and quite different from where I lived with my grandmother. It was a very large house, probably a 5 minutes walk from there. And there was literally a stream which divided the communities. And as a child, we were not allowed to go to that stream, but of course we did.
Of course, as soon as it's forbidden, then that's what you want to do, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And seeing things from a child does not often see the divide. I mean, obviously you see the physical signs of it, but in terms of the people living across that divide, you form friendships, you have conversations, you form alliances, and so you don't always see so clearly or so starkly the differences that the adults might see, which I think is quite a beautiful thing in childhood. And I have this in here because my main character, I drew on the experience I had, a wonderful experience living with my grandmother. I drew on that to talk about my main character seeing the zongo for the first time. He is living with his grandmother as well, a very comfortable life she has. And across from his grandmother, there is a zongo as well. Now, his father formed a friendship with a child from the zongo, and that's something which children will often do. Children will often form alliances, they will often form friendships. They haven't
across social boundaries.
Exactly, exactly. And they haven't always formed the biases that their parents have. So it's it's quite a potentially it's a fantastic age to engage children in equality and conversations about equality before adults' biases begin to seep in when they're a little bit older. But if you just permit me, if you just permit me, I'll just read from this. So
if you could give us a reading, that illustrates the point, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Ato's grandmother takes him to the edge of the stream of her community, and I read. Ato looked beyond the rugged bank at an expansive sea of rusty tin roofs that extended to the horizon. Years ago, his grandmother said, when your dad was a boy, Ato, many homes there had no toilets. No one picked up their trash. Back then, when the stream flooded, you'd even find the occasional dead sheep floating in here. Things are only slightly better now. The zongo was a jigsaw of concrete single-roomed homes built end-to-end in squiggly lines, wooden kiosks, one-roomed shacks. He could see where heavy rain had spat into the ground, eating gutters into the red earth around the small buildings. The water had gushed downhill, hacking furrows down the bank and vomiting their contents into the forbidden stream. Children, adults, goats, chickens picked their way nimbly over the terrain. Ato thought about the straight streets and wavy palms of Tamarind Ridge, where his grandmother lived. Why had she brought him here?
Yes, I love the description there.
Yes,
the rain spat.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love these descriptions. It's so vivid, it's so vivid. And, I mean, one thing that's always struck me, for example, is how Nima, which is home to one of the biggest zongos, well, the biggest zongo in Accra, is right next to Airport Residential, which is one of the very richest neighborhoods in Accra. So these contrasts really are there side by side.
They do, and don't forget, Nima is just half a kilometer, a third of a kilometer from where the president lives. The president of Ghana lives. The president of Ghana literally lived 100 meters away from my grandmother's house. So that just demonstrates how that just demonstrates
it's all mixed up together.
Exactly how close it can be. And interestingly, I mean, I have had the pleasure of reading your book as well. And I mean, one of the characters that I really, really enjoyed was Auntie Omotola. I just
Oh,
felt
the Nigerian lady.
the Nigerian lady.
The,
I feel
the
that
gele seller.
exactly. I feel that
Yeah.
language is also another aspect which clearly shows the divides that we have in Accra. And I love the way she was speaking her pidgin. Sounded distinct from Ghanaian pidgin. And I wonder
Yes.
whether you'd like to say anything about that.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes, yes. Well, for me, I'm actually a sort of languages was my first field of study, and I love languages, and so one of the things that I enjoyed very much in writing the Kaya Girl was giving a flavor, a smattering of the languages of Ghana as well as the pidgins of some of the characters. So my divide in my story is north and south, not just, yeah, it's not a stream. It's like the north and south of Ghana, which are quite divided socially and in so many other ways, culturally as well. So I put in a flavor of some of the northern languages, especially Dagbani, which is spoken by one of the main characters, Faiza. But then, as is typical in Ghana and Accra, especially, we also have people who come in from Nigeria and our neighboring countries. And actually, the Zongos that you talked about, we usually have a wide cross-section of people from all over the sub-region, the West African sub-region. But anyway, so Auntie Omotola is a gele trader. Now, the gele are those fantastic headdresses that Nigerian women wear. And she owns a stall next to the shop of the narrator of my story, Abena. So this is the book, the Kaya Girl. Yeah, you can see the head porter, Faiza, who is the girl from the north who comes down to work in the Makola market where they meet. So Auntie Omotola, as I said, has a gele shop next door to Abena's aunt's shop. So I'll just to give you a little flavor of that pidgin, I'll read a tiny bit that features her. Okay, so in this segment, on a rainy day, Abena has gone to visit Auntie Omotola, who has promised to teach her how to make geles. And so they've just had some time together, and Auntie Omotola has been teaching Abena how to make a gele. So I'll just read a tiny bit towards the end of Abena's visit. When we were done, we took a selfie together in our geles. My yellow one made me think of the sun, with rays flaring around it. The meat pie was crumbly and hot, and the chocolate milk was so creamy. I felt like a VIP as Auntie Omo and I sat eating and sipping with our geles on. I wished I could spend the rest of the day with her, but Kipti's knock came before I finished my pie. I wrapped up the other half and thanked Auntie Omo, reluctantly removing my gele. Stop! She held up her hand like a traffic cop. Take it with you. And this one too. She removed hers. Practice with them. Now your home may be that. But don't worry, she winked. I'll get cloth from your auntie. So now your home might be that. That's a taste of Nigerian pidgin, yeah, which I really love. I actually like it more than Ghanaian pidgin. I find it even more flavorsome than Ghanaian pidgin. So I really enjoyed rendering that. I did have some help from Nigerian friends to make sure I got it right.
Honestly, because there's such a difference between the way we speak our pidgin and the way the Nigerians speak the pidgin. But it's moving on from conversations. It's lots of really sweet conversations between Faisal and Abena in the book. I thoroughly enjoyed them, and it sort of illustrates a closeness across the social divide, which is one would almost say is the stuff of storybooks, but you know that is often the case. And
yes,
Abna's background is so different, and I remember there's a place where Faisal is talking about okra or something. I remember that struck me because for the first time ever, I grew okra in my backyard. I thought, oh my goodness, with the rising costs of vegetables and so forth, I grew tomatoes and garden eggs and okra, and the okra flowers are so beautiful. And I remember in the story, yes, Faisal talking about okra flowers, and I'm now wondering, oof, speaking with somebody who actually farms okra. I don't know whether you want to say anything about the friendship we had there.
Yeah, well, I mean, people have asked me, is it realistic? I mean, the friendships that you and I have rendered in our novels, they are extraordinary because it isn't very common to find children who are coming from very different sides of the social divide. It isn't very common to find them even in the same spaces and befriending each other and really getting to know each other. And so, for example, the friendship that you described, and which you say, I think you said your dad had a similar experience, or was it, your grandmother? I think that kind of friendship is unusual. But I think it really boils down to what you said about children not having had the time to develop those biases yet. And so I hope that they are possible. I mean, I know that they are possible, even if they are not very common. So yes, since you remember the past with the okro, I'll read a little bit from there. So this is one of the early conversations between Faiza and Abna, where Faiza asks Abna a lot about school because she wishes that she could go to school, but she doesn't. She doesn't go to school. She's a migrant from the north who works as a headquarter in the Macmillan market, which is one of the biggest markets in Accra. So she longs to go to school and she enjoys hearing Abna talk about school. So this excerpt is from one of those conversations. So what's it like? She turned back to me, going to such a school. Oh God, I hate school. Words failed her for the first time. Then, what happened to you there? Oh, it's not like anything terrible happened. It's just, school is school. We all hate it. I mean, everyone hates school, don't they? She carried on staring as if I just told her someone had died. Okay, look, I didn't mean I hate it like I hate okro or something. It's just such a drag having to go every day. Lessons can be so boring, and homework is the worst. You hate okro? She looked even sadder. What was wrong with hating okra? Didn't everyone? I farm it, she said. Okra is my best crop. It was my turn to get a loss for words. I'd never had such a conversation in my life. What girl farmed okra, for God's sake? Eating it was bad enough. What was I even doing here, sitting in Makola Market with this best okra farmer, Kayayo girl? So this is a moment where Abna really wonders, she starts to realize I'm making friends with somebody who is, from a different world altogether. So what did you think about the realism of this kind of friendship when you were writing your novel?
I suppose because of the background that I had, I think I found it quite plausible. I did have, even within families, you have children across the social divide, because I had, I had relatives, much poorer relatives, who would come and live with us, and they were, some of them were uneducated and were perhaps at the age of 13 or 14, were going to school for the first time. And you do tend to follow different trajectories. So I have a cousin who is my age, about 52 years old, and living under completely different circumstances. We used to play together as children. We laughed and talked and sang, but our lives have taken two completely different paths. And which is something I could not have predicted back then. And outside the family bonds, there are other relationships that form like that. But one would like to think that children hopefully can be sensitized to the differences and help, as they grow older, do what, not sort of develop a blinkered view of that. I feel that we sensitize them in our books when we write about these, and they see them at an early age. I think they are aware of how disadvantaged other children are, not because of anything that they have done. And I think this sort of helps to promote social justice, because children tend to become aware of it at a much earlier age. I feel I feel that if
I think two things. Sorry to interrupt you. Please go on.
Please go on.
I was going to say two things struck me that you said. One, that children, I think you said children have a very strong sense of justice, and secondly, that the age range that we are writing for in these novels is very much that of children who have not yet necessarily developed those biases, and therefore are a very receptive audience to reading material that shows, you know, a richer picture and gives them an insight into a world that is different from theirs, that they can they can get to know without prior judgment. And so, yes, I mean, I do sometimes wonder, is there any way in which the books we write help bridge these social gaps that we're depicting? For children on both sides of the divide, of the social divide, and even for the adults who, let's say, read the books to them or teach the books to them. I think that's a really important issue, a really important question. And I hope that as writers, you know, we, in our own small way, we may be opening our readers' eyes to things and perspectives that they may not have seen before, you know, reading our books, regardless of their ages.
Absolutely. In fact, I have, if I can just find it, I think there's an area in my book where I'll just give a brief background. The main character has become aware of injustices that are being carried out against underprivileged children, because you will always have situations where people will take advantage of underprivileged children. Wherever you have a society where there are inequalities, you know you are going to have people who will take advantage of it. Exactly. And our young protagonist is only 12 years old, but he is aware that there's something that's not quite right about an orphanage, a children's home, for which large amounts of money are being raised. And in a certain sense, these children are being exploited, but he has no evidence and would like to go and have a look. And I think there's a certain curiosity about children, which is quite realistic. If you'll permit me, I'll just...
Yes, please. I'd love to hear.
I'll just read from that. So the main character and his two friends have, through a rather torturous method, found the orphanage, and Atto lay flat on his stomach, peering through a hole in the wall. His peephole allowed him a view of a U-shaped building. A row of taps were fixed to the wall outside the building. The concrete ground around the taps was pitted. Green mold fanned around it. Hey! Two eyes appeared on the other side of Atto's hole. Atto jerked his head back, but kept eye contact. You looking for something? A boy's voice asked. Well, we heard about this place from people, good things, he said, and we wanted to see it. So you believe everything people is telling you? The two eyes asked. Who that? A third eye joined two eyes behind the hole. Well, Atto said, we know this is a good place. We heard you get a lot of good food. We get gari and beans in the morning, two eyes said. We get rice and beans in the afternoon. Gari and sugar in the evening, third eye said. I know you eat better than that, Leslie declared. We get beans with stones, said two eyes. We get rice with weevils, third eye said. Atto exchanged looks with his friends. That can't be true. If it's that bad, why don't you leave? He challenged. Two eyes dug a finger in his nostril. Same why you couldn't come in. Anyway, we got nowhere to go. Things are not good where we come from, so we just stay here. Hey, they spun around. A sweaty-faced man with a face like oily chocolate and a stomach that curved over his belt was lumbering towards them. A second, even larger man charged behind him. They were surprisingly swift. Before Atto could take 2 steps, he was in a gorilla grip. Look at these lizards. How did they get out? One captor grunted. Atto's writhing and fighting only served to tighten the grasp on him. He was hauled like a sack of potatoes round to the front where the security post was and chucked through the black gates. He landed hard on the pitted concrete that made up the front yard of Agora, and the gates closed with a sickening thud. So now our main character is actually inside the orphanage.
Oh my God.
And yes, and then has a chance to experience things first eye and then draw his own conclusion as to what's going there. So what I would like, I believe the reader will see is what can go on the other side. And for a child who often has an incredible sense of righteousness and justice, that's a great form or a great platform for activism and making sure that the right thing is done for children.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's brilliant, and I like that passage. It had a lot of tension. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, on that topic of role modeling, I in my day job, which involves a lot of social research, I've really seen how powerful it can be when children have role models of things that they would like to aspire to be. Sometimes in rural areas, I've asked children, you know, what would you like to be? And they will say something quite humble simply because they've never had the chance to observe anything else. Like, you know, I want to be a trotros mate. A trotro is like a public transport minibus, you know, in Ghana, because they just haven't had the chance to see anything else. And children yearn for role models, and it can make all the difference. If they never see something that they can aspire to, then they won't believe that they can be that thing. But when they do, and they see they see it in somebody who they could realistically be one day, I think it's extremely powerful.
It is powerful. And I think you actually demonstrated that quite powerfully in your book, because your main Fauzia, it's I mean, this may be a spoiler, but she moves from being a kayayo, a head porter in a market, to becoming a doctor. And I know that can happen because there is a young girl in Ghana who actually was a head porter carrying goods in the market, and who earned a scholarship to one of the top universities in the country. And I had the privilege of speaking with her, I had the privilege of having a conversation with her. It was so humbling, so
inspiring.
Yes, and I recall the president gave her her award when she graduated. Yes, so I don't know whether you want to say anything about Abena and Fauzia. How Fauzia rose to.
Yes, for me, it was very important to demonstrate that the only thing holding children like Faiza back was lack of opportunity. That, you know, these children, they are talented. They're, you know, all children everywhere have talent. They have intelligence, brilliance, and drive. And it's really the only thing that, you know, distinguishes between them in the end is their access to opportunities. And so it was important to me to demonstrate how far a girl like Faiza could go when she finally was able to gain access to opportunities. And they didn't come easily, but when she got them, she made the most of them. And she even transcended the rich girl in terms of her professional achievements, you know, by the end of the book. So yeah, it's just a bit of a spoiler, sorry, but it's difficult to discuss these issues without giving a few things away. So I'll read a little bit from the end of the book when the girls are reunited, which is also a spoiler, but the girls are reunited as adults when Faiza has become a doctor and Abna has just had a child. And Faiza actually helps to rescue Abna when she almost dies, you know, giving birth to her daughter. So later on, they get back together in the spot where they always used to meet as children, where they met in the market, which is outside her aunt's shop. And I'll just read one paragraph from one of the final chapters. I dusted off the little step outside the shop and sat down gingerly in my kente-oke, feeling the chilled air from under the door seep icily into the small of my back. Faiza hitched up her lace toga, and we both thought of her old silver bowl. She had traded it in for much smaller ones, full of syringes and cotton wool. So in that paragraph, I wanted to actually give that physical contrast, because as a kayayo, Faiza carries this big silver bowl on her head, in which she carries goods for market customers. And as a doctor, of course, she deals with, you know, what do they call, kidney bowls or whatever, where they put in, you know, medical supplies, syringes, bandages, and so on. But I wanted to make that contrast, you know, between what she had been and what she had become, because it's such a massive leap, like the girl that you were talking about, you know, the woman who went from being a kayayo to entering a top university. And so I'll do just one more quick reading that demonstrates this point. So this is later on in the same conversation. I reached for Faiza's hand and squeezed it. You're this Kaya girl. You have no idea how proud I am of you. Thanks, Ab. But I hope you don't envy me anymore. Well, there's just this teeny little thing. She rolled her eyes. Tell me. It's been amazing becoming a mother. But when I look at you, I wish I could be as professional, as independent. It's not easy balancing everything, Ab, and I'm so proud of you too. but I know there's still a globe-trotting journalist in there. I laughed. Hey, whatever happened with that competition? That article you were doing on the market, remember? Funny you should ask. I took a brown envelope out of my bag and handed it to her. Bo, she pulled out the printout. Published, second place in the urban bustle category. What did I tell you? Seriously, Ab, you should go back to school as soon as you can and do your master's. You have to chase those dreams. So in the book, I want to highlight the importance for any girls who read it really of fulfilling your potential and pursuing, the kind of profession that you dream about. And so when I wrote that, I wanted to show that even at the end, the rich girl, so to speak, even, now envies the poor girl, and the poor girl is hurtling along on her career path. And but she's at the same time encouraging her friend to also follow her dreams. Yeah. That's And along the same theme, I really loved Atu's grandmother in your story, Crossing the Stream. She was one of the figures that I just, I really bonded with, as it were. I thought she was fantastic. She was such a strong figure in his life. And I felt that she really influenced Atu when it came to navigating that social divide. Would you agree with that?
I would strongly. I admit that the grandmother I wrote in this story was from my heart. This was my grandmother. I mean, I always say my grandmother.
I suspected as much.
My grandmother was a dragon. When I was growing up, she was the scariest creature ever.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm so glad I grew. She didn't pass away until I was 40 years old, because all I would have remembered was she was like the Tyrannosaurus Rex. However, as I grew older, I came to appreciate her strength and her warmth and her wisdom and her love and generosity and all of those things. And as I was writing the story, I thought to myself, what would it have been like to be 12 years old and have this sort of feeling with my grandmother, the sort of feeling I had with her when I was older. So she's a very wise woman, and she is somebody who has made her mistakes, because she is somebody who, in her younger years, when she had her son, who is my main character's father, his late father, he died. Her son died young. She was very opposed to the idea of him forming friendships across the divide. This very stream that she took, this very stream that she took her grandson to. Now her son forms a friendship, and that friendship is quite a pivotal friendship, because the boy that he makes friends with across the stream is very influential in her son becoming the kind of person that he was later on in life. And in her later years, she has come to, because sometimes you learn later. It's as simple as that. Some learn early, some learn later. And she learned a little later the value of cherishing what each human brings to the table and being as supportive as possible. So she's seeing her grandson in a situation where he is looking and he can see injustice across the divide is actually extremely encouraging, given the fact that he has a mother who behaves exactly the way the grandmother would have in her day. A mother who's like, oh, no, don't go there, sheltering her son, protecting him, and believing that anybody who is different from you is going to corrupt you or is going to spoil you. That's what his mother felt.
That's the prejudice,
Exactly. His grandmother understood the value of the different flavors of people and what they can bring to you. So if it's okay with you, I'll just read a little bit about, so Atu is with his grandmother, and he is wondering, what do I do? I've been in this orphanage. I know what's going there on there. The person who runs this orphanage is a very powerful person, and can I come up against him? So we're looking at a child trying to speak to power, as it were, and how do, and even that is some sort of divide, because you are young and weak, and you're looking at somebody who is older and stronger. That is a divide that needs to be crossed as well. And often you need help and strength and encouragement to be able to take that step across that, So we have Atu's mother noticing that her grandson is in a quandary, and she says to him, Atu, when the rhythm of the drum changes, the dancers must also change their steps. I badly wanted your father to be a man whom everyone would admire and who would make me proud. I thought crossing the stream and making friends with kids across it would ruin my dreams for him. But crossing that stream was the best thing your father did. All that time spent outdoors with children from the Zongo built something special in him, a brave spirit. He was never one to give up, and he passed that spirit on to you. Atu digested her words and relaxed beside her with her arm resting lightly on him. His burning desire was to get to the bottom of what had happened. It wasn't just about going to Noma. It was about being brave and doing what he thought was the right thing. His grandmother looked at him. The bird that pecks at a rock trusts in the strength of its beak. Whatever you decide, Atu, be sensible and remember, I will always be on your side. And I think it's so important for every child to have someone older, wiser, loving, who can speak strength absolutely speak strength into them. Because as I said, that in itself is also another, and it's another bridge, yes, and it's another area where you have children who grow up afraid, and children who grow up full of trepidation because they haven't heard this. What a child hears and what they see on a day-to-day basis, it just can drive iron and strength and steel into their souls. And I think having those role models, whether in terms of making you stronger or whether in terms of making you aspire to something higher and something bigger and something better, is something that every child needs. Every child needs a mentor. Every child needs a role model. Yes, in fact, with this Kaya, you remember I mentioned a few minutes ago about a Kaya who became a graduate of one of the top universities in Ghana. I mean, her mentor was somebody on a billboard. She'd never even seen the person, never spoken to them.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, but she was, her father would push carts in the market, and her mother was working in a corn mill, and outside their hut was a huge sign, a billboard of a woman who had just graduated from the university, and she was wearing her mortarboard, and she had her certificate. And as a little girl, she would just look at it and look at it and look at it and think to herself, one day that will be me. I will be standing there looking beautiful with my mortarboard and my certificate. And that's exactly what happened. So
even just a picture.
Yes, we are adults now. So hopefully putting ourselves in the situation where we will help to build those positive pictures in children's minds and help them to see what they can possibly be is something that I hope we can do as adults and as writers, of course, as well.
Elizabeth, Irene, and Mamle, this has just been wonderful. And I had a whole list of questions. You've already answered almost all of them. I'm going to ask one question, though, before then I turn it over to Helen Bond. And that question is, we've heard about Abina's journalism, how she starts, this whole novel kind of starts with this idea. Elizabeth-Irene, can you talk about what Otto is doing with his friends and the whole part about the environmental of the patch?
Right.
And then Helen will do the rest of the Q&A.
Right. So Crossing the Stream is actually the first of two books. And in Crossing the Stream, Atu and his friends are longing to go to a bird paradise. Now, this bird paradise is it's an island, a beautiful island that Atu's father had helped to build. And it was very exclusive. Getting to the island was not something that you could just do. It was only by invitation, and an invitation hadn't been issued for 5 years. So when an invitation is finally issued, they get their environmental projects going very fast in order to try and get there. But of course, there are all sorts of challenges because nothing comes easy in this life. But their main aim is to promote an environmentally friendly project and hopefully win a chance to get to this beautiful bird paradise. Now, there's a lot that happens on this bird paradise in the next book, so that will be coming later. But essentially, these are children who are interested in the environment. These are children who desire to live in a way which protects the earth and to promote protection of the earth as well. And that's pretty much the background to Atu and his friends.
Thank you. Thank you both. I really did enjoy the back and forth conversation, and I absolutely love the reading of the text. It was fantastic. I did drop a note in the chat. Hopefully our audience will have questions, and now is your time to speak. You've been great listeners. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat, or you can just raise your hand, unmute, and speak. We'd love to hear your voices as well. So now is your time. So what are your questions for our two wonderful authors?
I think someone asked Sharon. Someone asked, I think this is Sharon. That's an anthropologist. I'm intrigued with the Zongo communities. But because of the class divide in Accra, I was unable and even discouraged by my African family members to not visit. You mentioned living with your grandmother, which is common on both sides of the Atlantic. Where were your parents? Were they studying/working abroad? I think this is to me. My parents actually lived with us as well. So my grandmother had a large house. She was a wealthy woman, so she had a really large house, and it was 2 flats. So she lived on the bottom flat and we lived with our parents on the top flat. But she worked from home. She was an undertaker and she worked from home. So when our parents went off to work, they did so with the comfort of knowing that my grandmother was there and she was in charge, and boy, was she in charge.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions? We do have some questions put together. And as Brenda said, for the most part, you spoke to most of those questions. But I think there's one that maybe you haven't spoke as much to. Both children have school projects that propel them into action. Can you talk about this just a bit more?
Okay, well, in the Kaya Girl, Abena, the narrator, it's not exactly a school project. It's a competition, a junior journalist competition that she has seen online, and she has entered herself for because she has dreams of becoming some kind of a writer and preferably a journalist. And so she decides that she will use her vacation with her aunt in Makola Market to get some inspiration for this journalist competition that she's going to enter. And she enters a particular category called urban bustle. And of course, Makola Market is is the epicenter of urban bustle. So she gets a lot of material for it. And in fact, the book opens with her taking a photo of the car park for as part of this project. And then Faiza, the Kayayo, accidentally walks into the frame. So that's how they kind of meet for the first time. So Abena is an aspiring writer and journalist, and that's why she enters that competition, which she ultimately does place second in that particular category.
I just would like to make a comment. I read both of the books and thoroughly enjoyed them, and it was at the end I was kind of milking it, taking my time to finish when I was getting closer to because I didn't want the stories to end. I mean, it just pulled me in. So thank you for writing such wonderful stories, and I'm excited about, hopefully sharing them with students. But I just had to say thank you, and they truly inspired me, and I wanted more. So it's wonderful to read a book and you don't want it to end. You don't want the story to end. So
that's good to hear.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Liana. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful to hear that. Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Now is your time to talk to these esteemed authors.
Well, while we're waiting, I have a question about getting published in the U.S. and making the books available. That has been a long struggle that we have had for so many decades. So I'm just so excited now that we're getting books, from authors on the continent. Can you tell us a little bit about the publishing process and how it happened?
Elizabeth, would you like to go first?
With particular reference to Crossing the Stream, fortunately, after writing 6 books, this is my 7th book. After my 6th book, I'm approached by Sarah Odedina and signed on as with her literary agency. And for me, that was then the platform for getting published abroad, because there are, I think Mamle will agree with me, in Ghana in particular, most of the publishers tend to be quite interested in the Ghanaian market and don't have too much of an interest in publishing across borders. And unless you are signed on with a publishing house outside the country, it does become a bit challenging getting published out. So for me, it was being signed on with Accord Literary that made all the difference. And I don't know whether Mamle has a similar story.
Yes, I mean, I actually tried to get the Kaya Girl published outside of Ghana. And it was when I was taken on by an agent in the US, Charlotte Sheedy, that Charlotte accepted the book and loved it, and found a publisher for it with Little Brown Books for Young Readers. Susan Rich acquired The Kaya Girl for Little Brown Books for Young Readers, and I think one of the reasons why she was interested in the book was because she had actually visited Ghana before. So I think it was very, it appealed to her. It was real to her, and she wanted to work with the book. And she was a wonderful editor. So that was a process for me. But it is difficult to get the books into an international market from Ghana. That's not an easy thing to do. So that's how it went. Yeah, so similar in that sense, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do have a question that just came in. Mm-hmm. Will the Kaya Girl become a film?
Well, we'll have to ask the filmmakers that question. I hope in time, yes, I hope in time it will. I think that's also a question for my agent. But it was published in June. So it's still only a few months that it's been on the market. So let's hope that that will happen in the course of time. Yes.
Wonderful. We have 1 minute left. So do we have any closing questions? If not, I'd just like to really quickly for Elizabeth and Mamle, what might be, in terms of presenting to teachers, what might be one thing that you want classrooms to get from your book? We just had a teacher just posted that she's ordered 2 of your books for her classroom.
Oh, wonderful.
Well, for me, I definitely would like it to be a message of hope. Every story that I write, I feel that I would like a child to leave feeling, I can do this, or just because I don't see it today doesn't mean that I'm not going to see it tomorrow. So for me, I'm hoping that it will be a story that will just breathe or light up that light of hope inside the child, that can do spirit within a child.
Thank you.
I think for me, what you said earlier, Elizabeth, about how when Atu ended up in the orphanage, how children can actually identify with the other side of the social divide, how children can learn about it, and how these books and how these stories can actually help children develop their own social consciousness. I think that is what I would like to see as an outcome. Yes.
Thank you very much. Brenda, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you, and the audience.
Thank you all very much. This has been a very enjoyable conversation. Thank you, Mamle.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you both for being here and sharing. I love to hear when authors read from their books. And I had just reviewed the books last night and this morning, and so it was just wonderful to hear you read the parts that I just finished reading. And I have to say this, I hate okra as a child. I hated it. And my aunt grew okra in her backyard, and she was always trying to get me to eat it, and so I have found a way. I like it in gumbo, and now that I know that there are flowers, I have a garden right in the front. This coming summer, there will be okra in my garden.
There will be okra. Excellent.
They're beautiful.
The flowers are beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you, and
thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you so much for being here.